Hi everybody, Richard Stienon with the Security Analytics XDR Demo Forum, and I am speaking with Carlo Minassian, who is the founder and CEO of LMNTRIX. Welcome, Carlo.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. And Carlo, we're going to talk everything MDR and XDR, and I want to get your take on what are the elements that make up XDR, what are the elements that make up MDR, and how are they different? Because a lot of people are getting confused over these topics.
Yeah, sure. So look, we, starting the company around 6 years ago, we didn't have the concept of XDR or MDR or the terms coined at the time. We went on to effectively come up with a technical solution to business problems that were impacting our clients. And the idea with XDR is to really build a completely new tech stack that's hyper-converged into a cyber defense platform. It needs to be holistic, it needs to be multi-vector, and it needs to provide unlimited retention window of full fidelity network and endpoint traffic. Now, in our case, XDR, from an LMNTRIX XDR point of view, it effectively we unify machine and underground intelligence, next-gen antivirus, EDR, NDR, network forensics, UBA with deceptions everywhere. And then obviously we complement that with the MDR components, which incorporate automated validation, investigation, containment, and remediation. So that's kind of a definition of XDR, I suppose. It's in our case, it's made up of 8 modules or 8 elements that individually are very powerful on their own, but when combined to share context and intelligence, they become a force multiplier. And so what you end up with is these elements working together as a single integrated system, covering much of the attack surface. So that's kind of a definition of XDR, and the MDR really is the operationalization of the platform, the XDR platform, which by our definition, it is a validated and integrated threat detection and response architecture that hunts down advanced and unknown threats that routinely bypass perimeter controls. So that's a little bit of a definition, but there are certain key, I suppose, functions or features that you should look for in MDR, and that includes their ability to detect threats that bypass perimeter controls, their ability to reduce the attacker's dwell time on the network to minutes and hours as opposed to weeks and months, their ability to validate, investigate, contain, and remediate incidents, so not send you unvalidated alerts, and finally, the ability to provide you with the post-breach forensics to give you the answers, not alerts, such as how did the attacker get in, how long were they there, how did they get around, what tools did they use, did they set up any backdoors, and what data did they access while they were there, and possibly, if available, what did they do with the data. So these are some of the key competencies that you should look for in MDR, and if they can't do any of these things, then most likely they are not a genuine or a true MDR. They're most likely have some of the features of an MDR, or then they're an MSSP trying to be an MDR.
Right. Carlo, I am fascinated by the number and breadth of the elements of an XDR solution and the MDR on top of it that you've come up with. Give me a feel for the evolution of that. How did, what was the idea that got you going in the first place? And then, did you just envision everything that you would need 6 years ago, or did you, build on as you went?
Look, the idea was simply to fix a business problem, to give clients a measurable risk reduction in terms of a risk. And that was the main goal that we tried to achieve. And what we found, solutions that were being delivered that we deliver today even, were born over 20 years ago. And they're based on logs and SIEM, and all the MSSPs use the exact same approach. And that approach simply wasn't working. And so we really looked at post-breach strategies, meaning looking for malware or human attackers that bypass perimeter controls. So we built a tech stack that did that. So we call it post-breach strategies for detecting malware and human attackers. The next element was to be able to do all the validation and investigation, containment and remediation. So we needed to have that capability built in. And finally, the post-breach forensics capability, the evidence after a breach, so you can replay an attack and tell the client, give the client the evidence that they need to say what happened. Kind of like a Tom Cruise Minority Report movie where he goes back in time and replays a scene. We wanted to be able to go back in time and replay an attack. So that's kind of thinking when it came to building our tech stack and the service that we went to market with.
So when you've got a complete solution, as you've described, how do you tell if a client is ready for it, I guess? You know, if they've already got a big SOC and all these tools and investment, maybe not. But if they're under constant barrage from ransomware and targeted attacks, maybe?
Look, I always ask the client 3 or 4 questions to qualify them, to see whether they're suitable for an LMNTRIX or an XDR or an MDR solution. And that's what is your ability to detect and respond to APTs and nation states that bypass your perimeter controls? My second question generally is about, do you have a problem with noise, false positives, and alert fatigue from your SIEM or MSSP? My third question generally is, what is your ability to validate, investigate, contain, and remediate every single alert in your environment? And my last question is, what is your post-breach forensic capability to figure out how the attacker got in, what they did, and what they touched while they were in your network? Most enterprises, especially in the small to mid-sized companies, don't have most of this in place. Even the enterprises will struggle to answer positively to those. Most of them are facing with the SIEM and the MSSP approach. And so in many cases, they're looking to get a SOC overnight because their current SOC or SIEM approach is failing and it's generating too much noise. It hasn't delivered any outcomes. They're looking at replacing their MSSP because, again, they're getting too many unvalidated alerts or they're not getting anything at all. They're looking to secure their cloud or monitor their IoT OT environment or mobile environment. So these are really the 4 or 5 use cases that clients approach us for. But those 3 or 4 questions that I ask very quickly qualify the client in or out for us.
Yeah, I bet they do. Those are great questions. And then, is there a ability for a customer to just buy your technology, or are they buying the bandage detection and response service that's fueled by the technology?
That's a good question. So look, when we started the business, part of our core design principles, there were 3 or 4 key design principles building the platform. And the first one was we wanted to deliver validated incidents so that the client wasn't dealing with a console full of alerts or meaningless reports or lots and lots of alerts from an MSSP. We wanted to remove and take the burden off the client from dealing with unvalidated alerts. And so we decided to deliver an outcome in the form of validated breaches or validated incidents so that clients could get answers and not more alerts, and they could get the signal and not the noise. And so that was one of the key design principles. And then the second one was it had to have automated containment and remediation built into it, into the system. So like we integrate with all the next-gen firewalls, Zscaler, Netscope, Cisco Umbrella, all the cloud providers that help us through automation to contain threats on the endpoints. So the third design principle was really about cost. We wanted to build the most powerful cyber defense, hyper-converged cyber defense platform that could be used by major governments and enterprises, but it could also scale down to small to medium enterprises. And we did that through the scalability of cloud computing, through multi-tenancy, through costing models that were based on size of clients and throughputs and so on. And the final element for us, which answers your question as part of the design principle, was to make sure that it was viable and could be used by other MDRs and MSSPs as a standalone platform. So our platform today it's kind of built like Salesforce. It's used across all of our MSSP and MDR partners. It's used across all of our clients on a single platform. We changed the URL, we customized the URL for the partner, the logo, and everything. So it gets completely white labeled for them. So they can either choose the XDR or get the XDR with the support of the MDR. Irrespective of that, we find that even the very large partners, they still don't have the 24/7 human element correct in terms of the skill set. So we complement them at no charge to make sure that every client gets a repeatable, consistent outcome from us.
Cool. So if I'm in the United States or Europe and I love what I see and hear, does your website have those partners that people can go to, or is it so white label that it's not even exposed?
It's actually not exposed, but we get a lot of leads coming through demand generation and through word of mouth, which we push back out to partners. That's kind of how we've grown so quickly across 14 countries through a distribution and a channel strategy that's helped us grow without hiring any sales or marketing people.
Got it. So sum up for me the LMNTRIX advantage. It's those things that I mentioned. We're firstly 6 years old, so we've been in the business of MDR and XDR for much longer than most. We don't have the baggage of logs and SIEM and the MSSPs. We're always innovating. We launched the IoT/OT solution this year, and in the next 6 to 12 months, we'll release the mobile defense solution. We will integrate any analytics or SIEM in our platform. So the way we operationalize our solution is quite different from everyone else that we know, in that we ask customers to block as many threat vectors as possible by using at least firewall, web, and email gateway type solutions. These three controls together block most of the common threat vectors into any network. We then deploy our own tech stack on the inside of the network on all endpoints or alongside existing endpoints, endpoint solutions, on all the choke points on the network. We deploy intelligence and deceptions everywhere. We then wait for that perimeter to fail. As it fails, we try and automate as much of the malware detection as possible. Human attackers and red teams, we bait and deceive, and everything else we miss, we hunt. And we hunt on networks, on packets, and on endpoints. Through this process of automated malware detection, baiting, deception, and hunting, a threat is identified, which is then validated, investigated, contained, and remediated. So as a client, what you experience is on average around 100 to 120 validated breaches or incidents every given year. That's kind of our current experience. We got rid of, with this approach, we basically look at every single threat that bypasses the perimeter control. We got rid of the noise problem. So that noise goes to the existing SIEM, SOC, or MSSP, and it drowns them with false positives. We don't see that anymore. We work exclusively on a quiet network, and we look at every single thing that bypasses it. And so we deliver a very different approach and a very different outcome to clients, where we are not just a very expensive messenger for their controls like a SIEM is, or we're not just sending them unvalidated alerts and false positives. So these are some of our advantages in terms of our approach. We dictate our own tech stack, our own platform.
and our own cyber defense center capability. And that team is important, made up of a 24/7 threat detection team, a threat response team, a threat hunting team, threat intelligence team, a metrics and communication team, and our engineering team. And most companies can't replicate much of this on a 24/7 basis, and only when you get to a certain scale you're able to do that, where you've got hunters on 24/7, you've got a threat response team and incident response team working around the clock. So these are some of our advantages apart from the design principles that I talked about.
Could you go into somebody like Colonial Pipeline, who in retrospect we discovered doesn't have a security team, right? They've got IT people who do password resets and stuff, but they really didn't have a security team. Could you go into an organization like that and just do security for them and give them that level of assurance?
Yeah, so they're the prime candidate for us. They're the perfect client because they don't have that baggage of traditional product selection. They don't have the old mindset of we need to collect logs or use a SIEM. So they're prime candidates, where clients have already made those investments in existing tooling, existing teams. You know, it's really hard for the business, for those folks, for the security people, to go back to the management and the business and say, we made a mistake. It's not working. And if you go back historically, every company that was breached was collecting logs, using a SIEM, or using an MSSP, or a combination of both. And in every case, they were breached. And so naturally, that traditional approach isn't working.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing there's such a huge universe of companies that don't have any security. So you're doing good work in helping them.
Thank you.
Well, this has been great, Carlo. I've gotten a feel for LMNTRIX. Very impressed with how much you've pulled together in only 6 years. And I'm looking forward to seeing your demo.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me.